if you could plot your book, not in a week, not in a month, not in a day, but in less than 60 minutes so that you can get started writing right away and create a book that is memorable, impactful, and compelling, that keeps readers glued to the page? Because it's not really about the car chases. It's about that secret ingredient that you need to add in order to create a book that people really love. This technique will work for any genre of book. It doesn't matter what you're writing. It's all about kind of writing from an emotional character standpoint instead of just a what's going to happen next in the action standpoint. Now, that said, I'm not saying don't have any action in your book. I'm not saying don't have the car chases. I'm saying that if you want to create an impactful book, you start from a position of impact, and this technique helps you do that really quickly. Now, in order to do this effectively in less than an hour, yes, you're going to figure out the ordinary plot stuff, the goal, motivation, and conflict. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But hang with me for what comes after, because the goal, motivation, and conflict are basically just the framework. It is the next questions that you ask after you figure those out that creates a really compelling, impactful book. Now, just as you do with a regular plot, you want to start with what your character's goal is. What do they want to accomplish? Do they want to rescue the princess? Do they want to find their lost child? Do they want to get to Mars before the deadline? Whatever their goal is, that's kind of the main overarching plot point of your book. That's what takes up the entire book. They start off with having this particular goal, and then they either accomplish it or they don't by the end of the book. If you look at the back cover blurb, the back of any book that you read, you'll see that the character's goal is laid out right there. For instance, in this Riley Sager book, it talks about how the main character, Emma, went through a pretty traumatic experience when she was at camp as a child. And the question that they ask is, wouldn't she like to put the past to rest and figure out what happened, essentially? So that becomes Emma's main goal from the beginning to the end of the book, is to figure out what happened in the past. And in doing so, she kind of pokes a few wasps' nests and gets a lot of people angry and puts herself in danger. So that main goal of solving the history is what creates the entire plot. Then you want to go with, why does my character want to do this? A lot of times that's pretty self-evident. Like if it's rescuing their child, well, duh, this is their kid and their kid's in danger. But why right now? Why do they need to do this so badly? The more why reasons you can come up with, the deeper the reader's going to root for your character. So I suggest writing at least 6. And those reasons why are their motivation. The motivation is what drives the character to get out of bed every day and go after this goal. For Emma, in The Last Time I Lied, it's not just about figuring out what happened to the past to clear her name or sort of solve it for herself. There becomes a lot of other reasons why she needs to do this. She has some friends there. She has some people who are dying. She has a lot of things going on that are motivating her to really want to finally solve this chapter of her life. Next, you want to figure out what's getting in their way. Is there a killer on the loose? Is there a child lost on Mars? Do they not speak the language of the place where they're at? Is there this whole Herculean journey they need to go through and a dragon to battle and all these other things? Those are called the conflicts. They're the roadblocks. Now, when you first do this, you will initially come up with all physical, tangible, external things, like the fact that the kid is in another country. That's a physical, tangible thing. Generally, when you first come up with your plot, you don't come up with the emotional things right away, because the easier ones to come up with are the physical, tangible ones. Those are the ones that first come to mind. Like, my character needs to rescue their child because they've been taken by a serial killer, but they are in another country and she doesn't speak the language. Makes sense, right? Easy to come up with. But these next questions that I'm going to give you are what help you dig in deep emotionally. And emotional books are the kind that readers talk about. So get out a piece of paper and write down these questions and the answers and take a few minutes to think about it. And if you can come up with several answers to the question, even better. Because remember my rule of 6 video, I talk about how coming up with 6 things makes you dig deeper than just the surface, top of mind kind of answers. The first question I want you to answer is, what problem does going after this goal create in the character's life? And you're probably thinking, well, she's going to rescue her child. How does that create a problem? Give me a second and I'll explain. A book takes place in media res, which means in the middle of the character's life. They already have other things going on. Maybe that's going after a promotion at work. Maybe that's trying to solve a murder. Maybe that is trying to repair their marriage. There's something already going on in your character's life, because we all have problems, all of us, at all times in our lives. There's very rarely even a moment in our life where there is absolutely zero problems. Even if your marriage is perfect and you guys are getting along wonderfully, there's probably a leak in the roof. Or if you just paid off your house and you're celebrating because now you have more money in your bank account, your car breaks down. You know what I mean? Like there's always something. All of us have that. And your character does too. So there needs to be things already happening. But what you want to think about is a little bit deeper than that. You want to look at this goal that your character has and say, what problem does this create? For instance, if your character is going to rescue her child, maybe that puts her job in jeopardy. Like she can't miss one more day at work or she'll be fired. And they're already on the verge of eviction and she doesn't have any money and she's kind of just winging it and taking off with this and she's not sure how she's going to be able to find her kid. Creates other problems. In Chuck Wendig's The Wanderers, when Nessie wanders off, and this is a book I've talked about in my Show Not Tell videos and in some other videos, but the father has a dairy farm that if he doesn't work, it will go under and they will not have any money to survive and they won't have a home. So in the beginning, that creates that problem. As the book goes along, and it's a really long book, other problems come up that come from their ordinary life, from their goal to stay with Nessie and save her. There's all kinds of other things going on. So as you're reading a book, it's kind of helpful to write down what other problems has going after this goal created for this character. Next question I want you to ask yourself is, what fear does this awaken in my character? Because fear is a really great connector. We all understand fears of abandonment, of failure, of rejection, all of those different fears that we have. When we go back to the example of the mother going after her kidnapped child, her child being kidnapped creates in her these fears of not being there when her kid needed her to. Maybe she was at that job all the time and she was never there. And so the kid was a latchkey kid. And so that guilt, that fear of losing her child creates a really dynamic, interesting book. So what fears does this awaken in your character about themselves? Are they afraid that this means they're guilty? In The Last Time I Lied, Emma feels like maybe it was her fault that those girls left, and her dealing with that fear of being responsible for the disappearance of her friends is a running theme throughout the whole book. And when it happens again and other campers disappear in the present day, that fear becomes manifest in her life. And so her deepest fears are awakened by exactly what's happening in the book. Then you take a final piece and you go back to those conflicts that you came up with, those things that are getting in your character's way. I want you to go back to that list. Hopefully you've got at least 6. And I want you to write next to each one of those, how does this thing getting in my character's way awaken those fears or make them worse or trigger them? For instance, if the mother has to fly to another country in order to rescue her child and she doesn't speak the language, that already awakens that fear that she's not enough for her kid, that she hasn't been there enough. Or maybe the kid has been kidnapped by her French ex-in-laws or German ex-in-laws or whatever you want to make them. And that awakens the fear that maybe her kid is happier there. And if you put the kid in a place where the kid seems happy, that again awakens that fear that she's not enough, that maybe she's doing the wrong thing. That's what I want you to do. I want you to look at each of these conflicts that are getting in your character's way and say, what is this doing to my character emotionally? What message are they getting? What are they telling themselves about it? When Shayna's sister becomes like this zombie and takes off, Shayna feels responsible. She was supposed to watch out for her little sister. Their mother died and she was supposed to kind of step into that motherly role. And everything that happens to Nessie, every bit of danger that Nessie ends up in, keeps reawakening that fear in Shayna that she did not protect her sister, that she wasn't there. And when other zombie type characters die because of things that their loved ones do, that makes Shayna feel like, maybe I'm responsible for that because I didn't help Nessie when I should have. And when it seems like Nessie is part of the problem that created this zombie thing, Shayna's fear is awakened even more because she realizes she wasn't paying attention, and that's why Nessie got into this trouble. All of the conflicts that get in the way of Shayna rescuing her sister keep nudging at those fears and making Shayna face them over and over again. Basically, what this all boils down to is that you are creating a book where the character has a big problem that matters a lot to them, that they have to solve by overcoming all of those inner demons, by dealing with all those things that they don't want to deal with, Because when characters overcome, when characters go after something despite being terrified, when characters kind of heal that inner part of them that has failed or let people down or been rejected or been abandoned, when they deal with those things, the reader's like, you go, you've got this. And that's what creates a really compelling story. So as a little bonus tip, let's talk about how you do that on a scene-by-scene basis, or even a page-by-page basis. The best way to do that is to have your character try and fail, try and fail, try and fail over and over again until they really, truly overcome their issues. A great example of this is Groundhog Day. The more that Bill Murray tries to save everybody, the more he begins to learn about himself, and the more he begins to realize that his selfishness and self-centeredness is what put all these people in his path. And when he becomes a more giving person who is not in it just for himself, that's when things start to work out. But remember the homeless guy that dies in the winter? That is a continual sense of failure for Bill Murray.
Sometimes people just die.
Not today.
And he goes through a lot of different emotional feelings with that, about blaming the old guy, feeling like if only he'd been there in time, maybe there wasn't enough that he could do. There's a lot of emotion buried in that one little tiny snippet that happens over and over again in the movie. It's a great example of seeing somebody try and fail, and continue to learn those lessons, face those fears, and overcome those problems by becoming a better, stronger version of themselves. That's all a plot really is. It's the character trying and failing to reach a solution that makes them be the best version of themselves. Now, if you got to the end of the 60 minutes and you're like, I don't know, I think I need to know more about my plot, I have a whole series of 6 videos here. But what I recommend is not watching those videos yet. I say, go write 3 chapters. Just see where it takes you. Go for it. And then come back and start refining and figuring out the next step. Let your creative mind breathe a little bit. Let the book start to come to life on the page. And every word that you put down brings you closer to your goal of having a finished book that readers rave about. And if you know another writer, or you're in a writing group where people are really struggling to plot or to write a really compelling book, share this video. I don't believe that other writers are our competition. I'm not really worried if another writer that writes in a similar vein as me learns what I'm teaching or becomes a better writer because of it. There's a lot of room for really good books in the world, and sharing is caring, as I've said before. So teach other writers how to write great books. You'll have more great books to read, and I will see you on the other side of the page.